Shopping for an e-bike?
We're going to answer your #1 question. Welcome to the channel. I'm Liz.
And I'm Paul, and these are exciting times to push past fear, build confidence, and get an e-bike.
That's right. Definitely exciting times to have an e-bike. They are super hot right now and game changers. And we wanted to bring you this video because our #1 video about e-bike shopping led to a lot of questions that we felt like we can answer. And we want to get right into the #1 question. But first of all, we do want to say that Paul has decades of biking experience and at least a few years of e-biking experience.
Yeah, I've been riding, easily 30 years, 30 plus years. I've lost track. But for the last 3 years, I switched to e-bikes. And, I know some of you say I'm cheating, but hey, I'm enjoying it, so what the heck.
Right. I mean, e-bikes are so much fun. I also have had an e-bike for 3 years. Should let you know that we are full-time RVers. We've been on the road for 3.5 years and we've become e-bike ambassadors. I mean, people always stop us and ask us questions. So let's get right into it. We have actually a bunch of questions we're going to answer, but let's talk about that top #1 question.
Yeah, the question that we get most often is, how far can it go?
The reason why we get asked that question so often is, #1, the manufacturers are overly optimistic. Think about buying a car and they tell you how much gas mileage you're going to get. So it's often not realistic. And then another thing is that they hide the information.
If you go onto the manufacturer's websites, you have to do a little searching to find what you really need to know to give you a true idea of the range of the bike. And what I'm talking about is the size of the battery. That is the key to how far the bike can go. And there's one number in particular that you want to look at, and that is the amp hour rating. Actually, what you need is you need to know what the watt hours are, but you can't know what the watt hours are without knowing what the amp hours are.
We should probably do a short answer because this does get complicated, but we don't want you to make a mistake. Now, one of the things we have noticed is that people will buy an e-bike and then get disappointed because it doesn't go far enough. The cliff notes on this are: look for a battery with a high amp hour number. And so a big battery, because think of your battery like a gas tank. So a big number is what?
Well, I've seen them as high as 20. Our bikes are 19.2.
With our batteries, we can go 60, 70 miles per one charge. And then what is small?
6 amp hour. The #1 selling e-bike out there right now has a 10.2 or 10.4 amp hour battery. You could comfortably go 20 miles on it at full assist level.
Right, so 20 miles may seem like far. If you haven't been on a bike in decades, 20 miles may be enough. If you can bike 10 miles on a traditional bike today, you could go 30 on an e-bike. It's
difficult to give you a hard number that, you can go 52 miles on this bike, and at 52 miles the assist stops. There just are too many variables: wind, the weight of the rider, how much work the rider wants to do.
So that's why it's not an easy answer, but I do want to get more in depth. So if you've got a pen and paper, you might want it now.
Really, to get an idea of the range, you need to get the watt hours. You do that by multiplying the voltage time amp hours. Our bikes, 52 volt batteries, 19.2 amp hours. So if you multiply those two together, you come up with 998.4. That is the watt hours. We have a 750 watt motor. If you divide 998.4 by 750, you get 1.33. What that tells you is that at maximum output of the motor, you can go 1 hour and 20 minutes roughly on the full charge.
With you doing no work at all. It's basically wide open, full throttle. All right, so here are a couple examples of some popular bikes. One is
a 48 volt 10.4 amp hour battery. You do the multiplication, that comes to 499.2. It has a 500 watt motor on it. That means you could go at full output for 1 hour.
Another example is one with a 48 volt battery, 12.27 amp hours. You do the math, you get 589, but it has a 750 watt motor, so you're not even getting an hour. Now, what size motor should you get?
I like 500 watt and above. A lot of the higher end bikes, you know, the bikes made by the big bike companies, Trek, Specialized, they mostly have, I think now they're going up to 350 watt. When they first came out, they were 250 watt.
And this is because Europe has limited the motor size to be no more than 250 watts. I think some parts of Canada are like that too. Now the difference is a bigger motor is going to help get you up hills, steep hills. In fact, I had a 250 watt motor on an e-bike that I was test riding in Santa Cruz. And if you know those hills up there, the bike just wasn't going to do it. And I tried as hard as I could, and I could not get the bike up the hill. If you're buying an e-mountain bike, you for sure want a bigger motor.
The smaller the number on the motor means the more work you're going to do as a rider.
If you're living in an area like Santa Cruz, San Francisco, you know, that's really got some steep hills, we recommend 500 watt motor or bigger.
I like to ride fast. I mean, the other day when we did our 40 miler, I had to stop for a nature break. And I told Liz, just keep going, I'll catch up. I did my business and jumped on the bike.
I was a good 3/4 mile ahead of him.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. And I was able to close the gap. I turned the assist level up, and I was riding it. At one point I got to 32 miles an hour.
And you don't need to go that fast if you like speed. Know that you can get that on a bike, and that is another thing about the size of the motor, is going to help you get that speed. 20 on an e-bike, I mean, that's plenty fast for a lot of people. I feel like 30 is a little fast, a little scary, but if you are someone into speed, you know, there's an e-bike. There's an e-bike out there for you.
Hub drives and mid drives, and you're wondering which one should I get. Well, the rule of thumb is if you're going to do a lot of hills, you want a mid drive. They apply more torque than a hub drive. Now, our bikes right now are both hub drive. You previously had a mid drive, and it was great in the hills. There was a hill that you rode.
I think that thing would have gone up a wall.
If it could have got traction, it could have gone straight up a vertical wall, yeah.
If you're looking for an e-mountain bike, you definitely want mid drive. So let's talk about fat tires, because that seems to be a big trend right now, and there's some pros and cons that I think you ought to think about before getting a fat tire.
I don't understand why somebody would want a fat tire if they're going to ride on paved trails all the time.
That is a common mistake. We'll meet somebody that gets an e-bike and they just want to use it to and from work, and they have a fat tire bike. Well, there's a couple negatives about fat tires. Let's talk about the positives first. They will allow you to go off-road, like, you know, you can do some trails or some gravel, that kind of thing, or maybe on the beach if they're super fat. But they are heavy and they have rolling resistance. So rolling resistance means that it's, you know, harder to get going from a stop. Of course, you've got a lot more weight too. And then the other thing is what?
Well, they're flat magnets. I mean, you've got more tire on the ground, so if there's something down there, you know, a nail, a piece of glass, your likelihood of catching that is higher than if you've got a skinnier tire. The fat tires, like you said, I mean, it's more rolling resistance, so you're not going to be able to go as fast, which, again, I love to go fast.
We have a ride coming up. It's 335 miles, and it's all off-road, and we're looking forward to having the fat tires.
Yeah, we're doing it on fat tire bikes, so we're not knocking fat tire bikes. We're just, I don't understand the trend of everybody buying fat tires when they're going to ride on paved trails all the time. One of the big differences between a bike that costs $1,000 and a bike that costs $2,000 or $2,500 are the components. Hydraulic brakes versus mechanical brakes. They might both be disc, but one is going to just be a cable, you know, pulling the caliper together, and the other is going to be juice brakes, hydraulic brakes. Another difference is how the controller on the bike knows how much power to apply, and they do this two different ways. One is cadence sensors, a ring of magnets around the chain ring, the thing that you're turning, that the chain goes around up on the cranks. The other method is a torque sensor. The higher priced bikes will have torque sensors, and in our case we have both. We have cadence and torque sensors on our bikes. It just makes the bike smoother.
Instead of getting a jerk assist. Yeah. Well, this really brings us into how much to spend on an e-bike. And it really depends on how much you think you're going to use it. If you are already riding, you certainly can justify spending more money. If you haven't been on a bike in decades and you don't even remember if you like riding a bike or not, you may not want to invest that much. You may just want to get like a starter e-bike, but you're not going to get the components that Paul just talked about. So it may not be as enjoyable, you know, and like we all say, you get what you pay for.
You can try to break that rule, but every time I've paid for it. I've ended up having to sell it for a loss, sell whatever I bought cheap for a loss, and then go out and buy the more expensive one.
Right. Now, if you really are concerned that it might be a 5-minute wonder and you aren't even sure if you're going to use it or just maybe to tool around a neighborhood or campground, there are $300 e-bikes. They to me don't look very comfortable or fun.
Yeah, you decide what you want to do with it. For us, a 20-mile ride for us is a short ride. Not bragging, it's just the way we ride. The last ride we did was 40.
Yeah.
And I would not want to do that on a cheap e-bike or
Well,
a cheap bike, period.
It probably wouldn't go that far. But so typically, you know, and prices are changing, but typically to get a quality e-bike, it's going to start at $1,000. And you know, this, like anything, the sky's the limit. You could spend over $10,000 for an e-bike.
When you're shopping for an e-bike, you'll notice that they have the bikes classified as Class 1, Class 2, or Class 3. A Class 1 bike is no throttle and pedal assist that will only assist you up to 20 miles an hour. Now, if you're able to pedal faster than 20 miles an hour, you can certainly get the bike over that, but the motor will stop assisting you at 20.
Class 2 is the same thing, but it adds a throttle. And again, the throttle will cut out at 20 miles an hour.
Throttle and pedal assist both will cut out at 20.
A Class 3 is a throttle, pedal assist, and you have assist up to 28 miles an hour. Well, we actually recommend throttles. There's two types of throttles. One is a twist throttle like you'd see on a motorcycle, and then one's like a thumb throttle. We have heard of people, and actually me too, has had a problem with the twist throttle. So we don't recommend them because it's easy to twist it while you're walking the bike or getting on or off. So the thumb throttle is a little easier. And let's talk about why we use the thumb throttle.
Our style of riding, we ride on the streets quite a bit. And if you're riding with traffic, I like to get across an intersection as quickly as possible from a stop. And what we'll do is we'll just goose the throttle. By the time we reach the middle of the intersection, I'm off the throttle and pedaling only.
Yeah, we're using it to break the weight, even on our 65-pound bikes. I mean, that's a lot more weight than on a traditional bike. So we're just using it to give us a good start. And I highly recommend that if you're doing any street riding so that you stay with the traffic.
Yeah, I mean, if you were riding on closed bike trails all the time, you probably wouldn't really need a throttle ever. Are Class 1, 2, and 3 legal everywhere? I don't know. You've got to check your state.
Well, one thing too is that the signs on bike trails have not caught up to the times. There are lots of bike trails we go on that'll say no motorized vehicles. Well, they're talking mopeds and motorcycles. They are not referring to e-bikes. We've talked to officials and we've found it's totally fine to have an e-bike on that type of trail, but you do need to do your own research so you're not breaking any rules. And while we're talking about that and safety, know that people who are walking on mixed-use trails haven't quite, you know, come to the times as with e-bikes. You definitely want to go slow when you're around walkers.
That is true, and that's on the street too. Let's say you're coming up to an intersection, we're cruising along at 22, 23 miles an hour. Somebody looks and sees, oh, it's a bicycle, and they'll pull out in front of you.
You're going twice as fast as they figure because their mind
Yep.
is 10 years ago.
A lot of the e-bikes out on the market you buy them online. You don't go to a bike shop. You certainly can. Bike shops are starting to get e-bikes in more and more, I've noticed. But you can get a better deal if you buy one online.
But we're also, you know, pro shopping local. One of the things that I've noticed is you walk into a bike shop, they'll only have all Trek, for example. So you don't get to shop different brands.
You could check with your local bike store to see if they'll work on your bike if you get one online. If they won't, you probably don't want to be dealing with that business in the first place because they're too stupid to be in business.
Right. They should take you, but it's good to check. They should take you in for any kind of work because they know if they get you in the store, you'll buy accessories, you'll buy a new helmet, maybe you'll fall in love with the bike they have on the floor. But you do want to make sure that they will do the work on a bike that they haven't sold. We mentioned that we are full-time RVers. We're traveling the country, and we actually have another YouTube channel that is just virtual bike rides. It just shows all the wonderful trails we have been on, from biking up the Going to the Sun Road in Glacier, biking in Moab, just all over the country.
The trail of the Coeur d'Alene, one of my favorite bike trails out there. If you're in the Idaho area, there's a 70-something, 73, 76, I can't remember the number, mile trail called the Trail of the Coeur d'Alene, and it is just spectacular.
And this will give you some great ideas of maybe planning a bike vacation. So do check out our channel and let us know your e-bike shopping questions. We'd love to help.